Well, welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, on our show, we discuss so many of the issues facing boomers, their parents, and what we know, of course, is an aging population, which I'm smack in the middle of. Today's show, I want to remind everybody, is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, a senior placement and elder care consulting organization that has a national network of professionally trained and experienced local advisors to assist families. They'll work with you in determining the right path for you or your loved one and discuss various long-term care options, whether it's in-home care, assisted living, memory care, or you just need an advocate to get advice from. We can have a Senior Care Authority advisor in your area provide you advice and give you a free 30-minute consultation. You just have to call us. Give us a call at 888-809-1231 or go to the website at www.seniorcareauthority.com. And I just want to thank everybody for all their support. Our listeners are growing each and every day. So many of you just download the free app. If you have an iPhone or Android phone, just type in the Aging Boomers and just download the free app, and you get up to date on all of our wonderful interviews and guests. And some of you have gone to our website at theagingboomers.com. Some of you have gone on to iTunes, iHeartRadio. There's a lot of different ways to listen to the show. So I just want to thank everybody for all their support with that. And speaking of that, we got another wonderful guest today. We have with us Anna Marie Pluhar. She founded Sharing Housing Incorporated. It's a nonprofit organization to promote the idea of shared housing for adults and to teach people how to find and keep good housemates. She is the author of Sharing Housing, a guidebook for finding and keeping good housemates, which gives a step-by-step process for screening potential housemates. So, Anna Marie, thank you so much for joining us on the show on a very important subject matter.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I guess the first question that comes off the top of my mind is, how'd you get started with this? Why? Was it the statistics that show this? A number of maybe single people? What led into all this?
It's actually a total accident, or perhaps it's an accident. Maybe there's more of a plan somehow. I got the idea for writing the book, Sharing Housing, when a friend of mine was complaining about her finances. And I said to her, well, you have an asset, use it. And she wailed something like, I don't know how to do that, when I said you should share housing. And I almost snapped. I do, because I had been living and have lived in shared housing for almost all my adult life. And I love it. I choose it. At the time that I was talking to this friend, I was living in a 4-bedroom house in Silver Spring, Maryland, that I bought on purpose to have housemates because I don't like living alone. So my friend asked me, she sort of said, oh, wait, will you coach me? And I said, yeah, of course I'll coach you. And we started talking some more about it and all of that, and I got off the phone and I kind of went, wait a second, I do have a process. Has anybody ever written about this? And so I went looking online. This was 2008, so early days for the Internet, and didn't find a book. And literally the next day, I spent 2 hours on a bus writing the outline for the book. And that was it. And that outline sat on my computer, and I wish I knew exactly how long, 5, 6 years, until the day when I just had this little voice, which was, are you ever going to do that project? And I went, okay, yeah, I guess I will. And a number of other things happened that made me feel, that helped me get it done. So the book came out in 2011. And then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with the book. But I figured out pretty quickly that there was a huge need, particularly among boomers, of which I am one, to encourage people who are single that they could, in fact, share housing, and that's a positive. That's not a less than, it's a plus for one's life. So that's how I got here.
Okay, so would you, in your experience thus far, all right, would you say that most of the people are looking for shared housing for economic reasons, or like you said,
Absolutely.
I just don't like to be alone?
I think most people who look at it now are doing it for the economic reasons, and that's so understandable with housing costs being so exorbitant. I mean, it's really quite amazing how much housing has increased. I think in California that the stat is something like in the last 5 years it's increased 75%.
Yeah, it's absurd.
I
Well,
know
you know, I'm in the Bay Area, and that's probably number one cost for housing in San Francisco.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know that in the financial advisors and such will say that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing. Otherwise, you are cost burdened, they call it. And if you're spending more than 50%, you are severely cost burdened. And most people who live by themselves are experiencing that crunch. So I really believe that people could have a whole lot more comfortable a life if they would share housing.
So, who are the people that you're seeing? Is it heavy in the boomer generation? Is it younger people?
Yes, and yes, and yes.
So all the above, all the above. Okay.
All of the above. I think the millennials kind of get it right off the bat. They just take a look and go, I can't, which is the way I started. I mean, this is the thing, is that I started during college, actually, and after college, and then after graduate school, living in shared housing, because that's just what we did. You know, we lived in these group houses, and eventually some people went off and people got married and had their families, left their group houses. I just never did that. So the millennials these days, they get it like we did when we were younger. But I'm really focused on boomers for whom, for all of the various different reasons, are not in a relationship, some of whom have not had kids, and who have loved living alone when they were busy with work. And when you're busy with work and you come home to your home, it's sanctuary, right? You get away from all those people, all those demands, you get to have your own space. It's a very different thing to retire. Right. And then you don't have a reason to leave the house and you're alone. And it's so hard to have connections in our society, I think.
So when you say shared housing, is this housing that has been built for that purpose, or it's just it's not, and just people are sharing the cost of living together?
I think so. There are more housing that's being built for sharing. The way I started out with this, it was simply taking, a 4-bedroom house and saying, okay, there are 4 bedrooms. One's going to be a guest room, one's going to be mine, and I've got 2 more. So let's have some people living in those. There are a lot of people in areas who are house rich, which is to say they are by themselves living in houses with extra bedrooms because they bought it early, they got it in the divorce, the kids have left, the husband's died. And this is usually women, by the way. Excuse me for sort of focusing on women, but that tends to be. And they're alone, right? So I'm really for the piece that gives me passion about this project is that it hurts me to think about people being lonely like that.
Got it. Yeah. No, it's so. What's the process? How are you helping people? Are you helping people find, I guess, the housing, find the connection? Are you more advising? Tell me what your service is and what's the process. So what I've been doing is I've been working on teaching people how to do it themselves, using the process that I developed
which worked for me for many, many years, and I found to be fast, effective, and efficient. So, but let me back up maybe and give you a definition, and listeners. I want people to have what I call home mates, right? So a home mate, in my definition, is someone whom you like and respect. Those are very important. Whose way of living at home is compatible enough that everybody is comfortable. Okay? And there's a lot in that sentence. So teaching people, so what I want to do is I want to teach people a process to getting clear about what is compatible at home. What do I need? What must I have? What can't I live with in my home that would have to be there? How do I ask that question? How do I explore the dimensions of home sharing? So I offer a webinar. I've got one coming up in September, a 4-session webinar that, people can take, and some people just take that webinar and they run with it. I also have a half-day workshop when organizations invite me to come and deliver that workshop, and I am really wanting, this is totally in my vision right now, I have designed a 3-day workshop, which is to help people go from, could I really do that? I don't know, to I believe I can help them learn enough so that at the end of that workshop they would be saying, aha, I know how to do it, and I trust myself to look somebody in the eye and say, this is not a good fit.
Right.
Because, let me let you ask a question.
No, go ahead, finish. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that a lot of people are afraid of shared housing, and for good reason. Home should be sanctuary. And we tend to hear the nightmare stories. We hear about bad housemates, or we remember a bad housemate. What we don't remember and we don't hear about is when it simply works. Mm-hmm. It's just life.
Right.
I once had an elderly woman come up to me after she heard me do a talk, and she said, I lived like that for 30 years. I thought nothing of it.
Right. So, how do most people find if they're open to some sort of shared housing, or is your term, looking for a home mate, and they're not the owner of the house, they're looking for a place to live? Where do they go? Where do they go?
It's a big question.
Aside from word of mouth or anything like that, is there a site to go to, or what?
Yeah, there are a couple of sites actually, and I'm going to mention a few that. But before I mention a site, I want to say that word of mouth through one's communities is the best way. And so what I encourage people to do and teach people how to do is to sort out who they are and what they're looking for so that they can write what I'm now calling an announcement. In my book, I call it an ad, and I had the Craigslist model. Mm-hmm. But I think people are a little leery of Craigslist for good reason these days. So putting together and articulating in an announcement what it is you're looking for, and handing it out, and telling people, and telling people, and telling people, and telling people. I have a story. I now have a colleague who lives in Tucson, Arizona, and Deb found Sharon. She lives with Sharon. They found each other because they were both looking. And they had a community of friends who said, hey, wait a second, you need to talk to this person. And they weren't so sure about it at the beginning. They were they had 2 or 3 conversations, interviews where they were like, and then I think that's the third one. They both had to leave because they had a meeting to go to. And they both went to the same meeting. And they found each other at that meeting and went, okay, we can do this, you know. And they are very public about how much they value the relationship that they have developed.
That's wonderful. So when people come to you for advice, and they go, where do I start? What do I do? What do you advise them? I mean, obviously, we'd like them to get your book, but give us a little bit. Give us a little bit.
Part of what the book offers and what I help people do in the webinar, etc., is to do a personal inventory. So, which is to say, how do you already live in your house? What's important to you? What's not important? What makes it home? So, one of the people have different standards of cleanliness. They have different standards of neatness. You need to kind of think about those sorts of things, because a neatnik should not live with a slob, right, and vice versa. That's what I mean by compatible enough. But two people who don't mind piles of newspapers are going to be perfectly happy with each other. Mm-hmm. So getting clear on who you are, how you now live in your house. And I call these the must-haves, and so that you clarify for yourself what your must-haves and your can't-live-withs are. That helps create parameters so that you can say to somebody who doesn't meet those right off the bat, hey, this doesn't work. Go up. That's not for me. But that's part of what you put in the announcement so that you attract somebody who meets those things, right?
Right.
So that's really it's such an important step one in looking at your routines and looking at what kind of space you have available or what kind of space you want to live in, getting clear about all of that. So it's that sort of visioning or clarity is so critical. And I will tell you, Frank, that all of the bad stories I've heard come from an ineffective selection process.
Yeah, I was going to say that I see a lot of the advantages, but the horror stories could be pretty bad, I would think. If not planned
the horror stories are bad.
Yeah.
So how do you learn to trust yourself to see the red flags? And that's part of what I'm wanting to teach, and I think it might take a 3-day workshop, and I haven't yet tried that out because I don't yet have the 12 people together to try it out. But there are people who are perfectly capable of reading the book and they just go. And they take it from there. I've had people take the webinar and they can take it from there. There's a combination of being clear about who you are and trusting your gut. If the first time you talk to somebody and you say, oh, I don't like this person, that's never going to change.
Right. So
you have to trust your gut.
Yeah, what advice, I mean, like you said, and I know people who've done this, and I never really thought of it as a homemade or shared housing, but it is, where I know somebody happened to be a female and husband passed away. She had the home, and she had a couple friends that rented out a bedroom. Yep.
And
it was very compatible. All worked out well. Okay, but I guess the question is, what advice do you give to, let's say, the homeowner? All right, to make sure I'm sure there could be legal issues. I'm sure. What advice do you give? That's just not so simple as let's just find a compatible roommate. There's got to be a lot more to it than that.
So there's a couple of places. Beyond the must-haves and can't live with, and your gut check about whether or not you like this person and whether you're kind of having a good conversation, and the compatibility around how you use the home, I highly not even recommend, I insist that people get references and they talk to those references. It's not a reference a la a security check or a credit check, although people want to do those, that's fine with me. But the talking to somebody who knows the person that you're considering living with and saying, this person's thinking about living with me, tell me about this person, and listening to what that person says and also how long they've known the person, how do they know the person, have they lived with them before. All of those sorts of things are ways of understanding whether this person that you've met is actually the person they say they are. Also, if you're doing a homemate thing, it doesn't have to be an overnight decision. You can have coffee together. You can have another coffee together. You can go to each other's homes. You like the way each other lives, right? You can tell a lot. You have social media these days. You can look somebody up on Facebook. In fact, in my book, I have a story about a younger woman who was trying to decide between two possible housemates, and she looked them up, and one of them had had a really bad accident, and her community had come together to raise money to help her pay for her medical expenses. And as the person I was talking to said, I figured that if this was somebody the community cared enough about, it would be a good fit for me, right?
Right.
And,
right.
Right. So you can know a lot about a person ahead of time.
Yeah. I guess, my question, and again, just because I'm in the business of senior care, all right, I think about, well, they could have been very compatible. Everything could have been fine at the beginning. But let's just say that the person renting the room or renting the space, let's just say their health starts to decline. Especially if you're dealing with a boomer generation as they age, and everybody wants to be independent. Nobody wants to say I need help. But let's just say that happens. I guess and the homeowner is going, might not be compatible anymore because, she's having falls, she's not remembering things, whatever the case may be, okay? But I guess I look at it that if it's not compatible for the renter, based on the terms of the agreement, they leave. But if it's not compatible for the homeowner, that's where it could get sticky, I guess. So any thoughts there?
I think it can get sticky, and I think that this is where it might be useful to have somebody to talk to. I can see that. There has to be some... So in my book, I talk about when is the relationship over. And this comes from my personal experience that when it's over when you don't want to go home. That's like, oh, okay. And I think that the homeowner has to be able to say to this person, you need care beyond what I can give you. What are you going to do?
Right.
And this is going to be very hard. I don't think that this is going to be easy, but I don't think it's a reason to not do it, because I also think that two people can help each other and stay independent longer than a single person.
I would 100% agree. And that's why I say the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, no doubt about it.
Right. We haven't talked about the benefit of, help, literally help,
right.
And help in an emergency. And help, that the hospitals don't release somebody unless there's somebody at home to take care of them, right?
Right.
And that kind of thing.
And the help could be just engagement. Somebody being home
Absolutely.
alone, sitting in front of the TV all the time is not a good thing. Having engagement and things like that is conversation is a positive. So
and we know that social isolation is a really big issue for for seniors,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
And that this is a way to address that and not allow oneself to become socially isolated.
So, Anna Marie, how can people reach out to you? Tell us, your website or any other information you'd like to share with our listeners.
So I'm at sharinghousing.com, and also my nonprofit organization is sharinghousing.org. Mm-hmm. And on that website, I have blogs, I have a newsletter, I sell my webinar, I have my webinar, you can register for my webinar there, I sell my book and a workbook and various other resources I've got lined up to get on the website there. I'm on Facebook, Sharing Housing, and we also have a closed Facebook group called Hello Homemate, which is designed to be a place for people to talk to one another about this idea. And that, people have to apply to enter, and we accept most people. So those are the best. I'm sort of on Twitter, but not really.
Yeah.
And I can always be reached at connect@sharinghousing.com.
Got it. Okay, great. So, listen, you've been doing it for a little bit. You're seeing probably some trends. You've talked to a lot of people. Kind of, what's your hope for the future? And what do you?
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a little bit. 3-5 years. What do you think is going to be as the boomers are aging?
Well, I hope it's actually a little longer than 5 years, but we'll work with 5 years. I hope that we as a society get to a place where we assume that people are going to live together. Mm-hmm. We've got this strange assumption right now that if I'm single, I should live alone. And we as human beings have never done that. We're social. We live together. And it's a very strange piece of our world right now that people live by themselves. So I would hope that, 10 years down the road, somebody says, I live by myself, and another person says, why? Why do you do that? Which is the reverse of what's happening now.
Right. Well, I think that's a good hope. I do.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I would just trying to make a difference, and I think it makes a big difference in people's lives when they have somebody who's at home. Margaret Mead said that she thinks that it's almost a universal human need to have someone who wonders where you are when you don't come home at night.
Right. Well, great. Well,
right.
Anna Marie, thank you so much for joining us on the Age of Boomers. Very informative. Check out Anna Marie's website at sharinghousing.org as well as sharinghousing.com. Pick up her book. Great guidebook for sharing housing, a guidebook for finding and keeping good housemates. And you get that on Amazon, right?
You can get that on Amazon, absolutely. Yeah. Or on my website, either place.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for joining us on the Aging Boomers. Just be safe out there, and we'll talk to you all soon.